Hey everyone, welcome to Encounters USA. If it's aliens, UFOs, Bigfoot, or Dogman you're looking for, you came to the right place. Now listen up as we listen to some of the latest encounters. Hello everybody and welcome to Encounters USA. Guys, we have got a great show for you today. We have the one and only Kerry Cassidy, head of Project Camelot. Now Kerry, I'm going to let you just sit there for 1 second as I just relate to everybody that Kerry has, this is actually my third podcast with Kerry, so we have somewhat of a history. But before we even go into any of that, I want to first of all apologize for the wife beater I'm wearing. It gets very hot in here and there's something wrong with my AC. It's July, so I apologize for the wife beater. Maybe you could dim the screen or do some kind of, use an app to make me into like Joe Camel or something like that. So, Kerry, this is actually my third podcast. So before I say anything else about you, welcome to Encounters USA.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
All right. So, Kerry, I want to just go back over our previous encounters. The first time I was on your show, you introduced me and my book, which is back here, which is Deceptions of the Ages. And when I came out, it's about the connections between Mormons, Freemasons, and extraterrestrials. And I came out with a white shirt, and I had pretty short hair, much shorter than now, and I had on a tie. And you got so many bad comments. Why is that guy on your podcast? Then the next time I was on, you were on my podcast, and that was when it was Books in Hindsight. And we changed that format because I wanted to do Aliens, Bigfoot, and Dogman. So, Kerry, you are basically, although it's our third time meeting, this is the first time you are encountering the podcast guests and listeners that I have on my show. So, Kerry Cassidy, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and about Project Camelot?
Okay, so I'm an investigative reporter, documentary filmmaker, and I started Project Camelot 15 years ago and eventually interviewed a guy named Bill Ryan, who became my partner for 3 years, the first 3 years of operation. And then he moved on and I continued the project. So like I say, I've been going for about 15 years. And before that, I did a tremendous amount of investigation as well. And so what can I tell you? I've been investigating conspiracies of all kinds. I specialize in whistleblowers from above top secret. And I have really interviewed about 1,000 people on both radio and video. And my YouTube channel has over 62 million unique viewers worldwide, and over 230,000 subscribers.
Yeah, Kerry, you are no stranger to, I'm sure everybody who listens to this podcast knows who you are. But just in case there are those rare one or two people, I just want them to understand that you're the princess of the paranormal. You're the queen of psychic phenomena. And you've covered and talked to just about everybody in the business. So that's why it's such a great honor to have you on Encounters USA. So, Kerry, let's not beat around the bush here, or let's not delay too much. Why don't you let us know? And I also want to point out that Kerry's doing a simulcast with her listeners. So before I start, running my mouth even more, you want to say anything to your listeners?
No, I mean, this is a broadcast that I will put up on my YouTube channel after the fact. So I will actually edit it, make sure we have good titles and all that sort of thing, as well as make sure the sound is good. So we're actually fine. We can just roll on.
No free giveaways. All right. Well, then we are going to move on. Kerry, I have to admit, I love to watch your show. I love to watch Project Camelot. And the other day I was watching one of your shows, and you were going to be interviewed by somebody, and I've never seen that before. But basically, they said, go ahead and talk for half an hour or 45 minutes. And I said, well, this is like a do-it-yourself kind of podcast, I guess. So I watched. I didn't have a lot of time to watch it, but and I'd already watched your ET encounters, which we're going to talk about, or your ET updates, which we're going to talk about. So I imagine that you just talked about most of that. So I kind of felt bad for you, but you came off pretty well. All right, so let's see. Let's talk about, first of all, Kerry, on this podcast, and we had talked a little bit before the show that you do actually talk to people about Bigfoot, and do you cover Dogman as well?
Well, I don't know what you mean by the name Dogman. I don't know if you mean.
Oh boy.
I don't know, if you're talking about, wolfmen type individuals. I don't know if you're talking about individuals that come from Sirius and are related to the dog beings that, there is a certain race of beings that are called dog beings, but that's not the name of them. I actually, one of my witnesses talks about them briefly, but I forget the name that he uses. There's a certain name that they go by. But I don't know. I'm not sure or familiar with this terminology called Dogman.
Well, I wasn't either until like 6 months ago. I started listening to podcasts like Dogman Radio, and apparently, and there's the, whenever I try to think of an author's name on this show, I can't think of it, but they did The Beast of Bray Road. And that was a book that came out, and it's about this thing in Michigan. It walks upright. It has the features of a wolf or a dog, but it walks upright or it runs, and it's like 10 feet tall when it stands up, and it's like invincible to bullets. And there's a lot of credible people in like Michigan and the Midwest and even in the South that say, in fact, I had a guy on last week, Scott Carpenter, who had videotaped one off of his rear shoulder camera that was just kind of watching him through the bushes. So it's really interesting stuff to get into, and I'm just kind of freaked out that one of these things even exists. But I do believe that somehow or another, some of them have a connection to Skinwalker Ranch, which I know you know about.
Okay, but I mean, in saying that somebody has a relationship to Skinwalker Ranch, but you're talking about a completely different location in the United States.
Well,
keep in mind there are thousands, if not millions, of kinds of extraterrestrials, as well as beings from inner Earth and so on that are visiting the Earth. And they could come through portals from anywhere, really, in the solar systems, galaxies, etc. And so I don't know, what this particular kind of being it is that people are seeing. I don't know that they've had such a sighting, for example, at Skinwalker Ranch. I don't recall that they had. But
well, they had some of the government researchers said that they'd watched a portal open up and these dire wolves came out, and then they ran off and the portal closed, and the dire wolf really matches almost exactly the description of this Dogman, except it's running around on two legs. So possibility of an Indian curse or Native American curse?
Well, I don't know. I mean, again, this is nothing I've ever investigated, other than knowing about dog beings, and of course, there's the wolf, or Wolfen. If you remember that movie from long ago, and then of course Wolverine from
Yeah.
the X-Men, and so on. So there could be, in fact, on the sort of temples of Egypt, there is are carvings of what, in essence, are a dog-like being.
Anubis.
Yeah, Anubis, and he's known for guarding the temple sites and so on. So it's not out of the question. It's just not something that I've been investigating, actually. So I don't
Okay.
want to.
Well, I'm trying to turn you onto it because it is just fascinating, and I don't want to let it go that you brought up the term wolfen, because I think that, and I know a lot of people listen to your podcast or and watch you on YouTube. So I want to get a movement started to change Dogman to wolfen, because I think Dogman just doesn't really apply, and wolfen is so much better because it has that like German rock band sound to it as well. So.
Well, I can say that Wolfen obviously was a movie. I think it came out back in the 70s or 80s.
Yeah.
It was an 80s movie. But I was in that movie.
Oh my gosh.
I worked on that movie.
Oh, wow.
I was in New York at the time, and I was fairly young, and I was working in the company that made Wolfen. Michael Wadley was the director, and so they were shooting, and I was the receptionist, and so I sort of helped during some casting, and I also ended up, they needed people that wanted to be like, I think I played a terrorist or something, but I didn't do anything. They just photographed me and made me into like one of the background images or whatever. I don't even remember exactly, but at the time I was studying acting, so it meant something. But anyway, so I did work on the movie Wolfen.
Well, then, Kerry, who would be more likely to spearhead this movement of mine than you? Because you have that celebrity status, to get that Dogman changed over to Wolfen officially, maybe an act of Congress or something. But I think you need to get behind it.
Well, I don't. That's actually not something I would get involved in, but I appreciate that you want to change the name Dogman.
All right.
I don't. Whatever. All I can say is that whether or not it's an actual being, whether there is a certain race of beings now coming through, whether there's a sort of a shape-shifting takeover by this kind of wolf, type of thing. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. All right, Kerry. Well, it sounds like you're giving me a very tactical, diplomatic brush off, and that's fine. I can accept that, but I'm not going to let this Wolfen thing die that easily. So let's move on to our next topic, and that is I've been very fortunate in the past few weeks to have interviewed a friend of Melba Ketchum, who did the Bigfoot Genome Project, or Sasquatch Genome Project. I've talked to Scott Carpenter, who wrote Truth Denied, where he published a book about the project. And I've also had a chance to talk to Ron Moorhead, who was in Dave Paulides' last movie. Have you had a chance to check that out?
No, I haven't. I think he does good work. What is this movie about? Is it the same thing as?
Yeah. Except this one, they're hunters. They're all hunters that end up missing. So.
I see.
And
okay.
How Ron is involved is they are up on a camp up in Northern California. Probably, I don't know exactly where you are, but probably somewhere near you. And
I'm actually in Southern California.
Then nowhere near you, and they They are. You guess these things, and sometimes it just doesn't work out. So, all right. So they are in Northern California, and they have to pack in. And one night, they'd actually started having activity in 1957, I believe, but in 1974, I mean, they had vocalizations. I mean, they had basically as conversations of these Bigfoot that are talking to them, and they're up there all by themselves. They've got guns, but they're just sitting there. Oh my gosh, are we going to have to shoot our way out? And it is, I haven't talked to Ron about this, but I will, but it is my opinion that if you look at all the Bigfoot encounters, they don't really seek people out. And he says, I think they were trying to talk to me or talk to us. And I think that probably that was why they came out, was to ask them something. And then he said his wife, the Bigfoot wife, made him go away. She kept telling him, saying things to him. So they ended up leaving. But it's just fascinating. But Ron was on my podcast a few weeks ago, and it was really nice. So I do recommend you watching that movie, because it also goes into UFOs, because they also saw one of his friends, a fireman, saw a Bigfoot next to a UFO right down the side of the mountain. So there's a lot of stuff that he's seen, and information that he has access to that is just fascinating. So yeah, I recommend that movie.
Okay, what's the name of it? Do you know?
It's The Hunted, Missing 411, or Missing 411, The Hunted, and it's David Paulides, and available. I've seen it on Amazon, so no plug for Amazon there. So, all right, but what I'm kind of alluding to here, are you familiar with the Genome Project?
Yes.
Well, what I want to talk to you about, and not for in too much depth, but you deal with extraterrestrial topics mostly, correct?
Well, I deal with the secret space program, and that involves ETs, certainly, UFO sightings, as well as drama that's going on between the members of the secret space program, the upper echelons, and whatever they choose to put out in terms of disclosure, CIA, and really conspiracies all across the board. So I cover a lot of things. Yeah. And I interviewed a woman whose name I'm not remembering off the top of my head, who was sort of considers herself instrumental, as that they tracked her, sort of read her DNA or whatever it is. And anyway, she was on my show quite a while ago. But so yes, I'm familiar with it.
Okay. Well, my point here is that if you look at the events that transpired, they started doing a study, they collected evidence, they did everything they were supposed to do with their findings, presented the evidence, and I mean, so close to them. I mean, there's a story of the journal Nature, and they're going to publish it, and they approach them, and then suddenly, bam. Nothing. There's nothing, and they leaked the evidence to people like the Bigfoot. The Bigfoot show. They leaked the evidence to the Bigfoot show, the hunting Bigfoot thing. So just a complete disaster, totally unprofessional. But it's the same script. It doesn't matter if it's Bigfoot or UFOs. And then, excuse my French, but every time there is always some quote educated professor or something, some jackass that will basically come out and say whatever these people saw is not what these people saw, and because I have a degree, then what I say counts, and they're nuts. And it's the same script, and it's the same thing, and then they destroy you. So that's what I want to talk to you about now, because we're going to be talking about disclosure. But isn't that the same script?
Well, there are things that they're attempting to put out there to the Stars Academy. You may know about them, and the members of the CIA, and also other organizations that are part of that sort of effort. to bring, actually, one of the reasons they exist is to try to reverse engineer alien technology, but that's already been done, of course, as part of the secret space program. They're trying to bring it into the commercial sector. That's one of their missions. The other is a form of disclosure, and documents are being released or leaked at this time. There's one specific situation going on with regard to what's called the alien autopsy. That is highly controversial, and they have just changed their story, and supposedly one of them was interviewed, Kit Green, and then the interview is never going to see the light of day, apparently. And that interview was conducted by Rich Dolan, a well-known researcher in our sector. So they say some kind of article will come out, but they are backing off of any kind of release of anything, really. So in answer to your question, if you're talking about a sort of a feint, in a sense, in other words, they put something out or look like they're going to put something out and then they don't. So that goes on a lot. I think that's not actually intentional. I think what happens is you get lower level individuals who are still fairly high up the food chain taking certain actions, and then the dark side of the secret space program, secret government, steps in and basically nixes the whole thing, and with threats and so on. And so those people are suddenly silenced, and it's a rather embarrassing kind of one-upmanship, if you will. So I think that there is a drama going on behind the scenes.
Yeah, and it was, it wasn't. It was the scariest thing, I think, is that. Do you know who stopped it? In one case, it was a lawyer, and not an academician or a politician. It was a lawyer that stopped that. So how and why does a lawyer stop that? And I don't know so much that it was where they were trying to. They were saying, "Oh, we're going to discover Bigfoot and all that." It was just that it was kind of a mistake of the project to come out and say that they were looking for the DNA, because when that news got out, then it just opened them up basically to ridicule. And who knows what would have happened if they would have left it alone. But the fact is, in the Bigfoot community, and I think scientifically, most people accept her results. And the results are that those things have female human DNA in their mitochondrial DNA. They don't have mitochondrial DNA for a Bigfoot. It's a human female DNA. Well, I mean, mitochondrial DNA is human. So anyway, that's what they found, and most people support that. So, when you...
Wait. You're saying they tried to figure out the genome of the Yeti, Bigfoot, aka Bigfoot?
Well, yeah, they found it. They had all this DNA evidence. They had blood, hair samples, skin samples, and gave it to Melba Ketchum, and she sent them out to different labs, 12 different labs, and they all came back and said the same thing. They said you have the male nuclear DNA from the nucleus, of course, is, we don't know what that is. We can't identify it. But they said the mitochondrial DNA is human. It's human. So, and that's what they found. So Bigfoot running around, of the samples that they brought in and tested, that's what they found in each case. 12 different labs found the same thing, and they found nothing.
Okay, I have to say, I wouldn't believe those findings, first of all. But second of all, I know that the actual Yeti is a being that can go interdimensional and is basically a form of ET. It's not a conventional way that we think about ETs, but for all intents and purposes, dolphins are ETs coming from another planet and being here on this planet. So that's
now wait. Why wouldn't you believe the findings? I mean, they were tested and listen. Understand that this is not, they're not, I'm not saying that this is Bigfoot DNA. That's what they said. I'm saying that what they found was an unknown strand from the male, unknown, not in the genome. No record of it. And 12 different labs came out and said the mitochondrial is human. It's a human. So from a human female.
So then what I would say, aside from what I've said just previous to this, is that if they're finding female DNA, what happens is human females are used throughout the galaxies as considered the most, for some reason, compatible to do genetic engineering with other beings. And so this is why there is a lot of stealing of women off the planet, and certainly, a focus, their females are a focus of Satanism, etc. But for some reason, the human female, her genetics or her makeup is as a vessel for genetic interbreeding is very kind of conducive and easy to work with, from what I understand. And therefore, what you may be talking about is a Yeti human hybrid. And that's a whole different animal, literally, I mean, or a different being than a pure Yeti. So if the DNA they've been given shows traces of human DNA and something else, then what you're talking about is a hybrid situation. And it is very possible that there is some attempt to hybridize even that race. I mean, there are so many extraterrestrials that have interfered with our genome and all through the ages that it wouldn't surprise me if we're going to find out that Yetis are trying to interbreed.
Yeah, and it's very difficult to go from we have DNA tested in 12 labs and we don't know what this is to jumping and saying, well, these are all over the galaxy and whatever, because you're not going to, in the scientific community, that argument is not going to get you anywhere. But what you're talking about is probably correct, because all the alien abductions, what do? They take eggs from the female. So how do we know they're not cooking up some kind of Bigfoot up there? We don't know that, and what we have to do is try to explain why is there female DNA in the Bigfoot. And the other thing that you mentioned, I absolutely agree with you with. 12, I don't know how many samples they brought in. I know they went to 12 different labs and they all came out with the same thing. I think that what they have is a hybrid, and I think, and it's my own opinion and it's not worth anything, but I think that there are purebreds out there. They're 12 to 15 feet tall, and they interbreed, and then that's how you end up with a hybrid DNA. So I agree with you absolutely on that. But you don't know. So not yet. So
well, I mean, it depends. If you can trust the sample that you've got, in a sense, you do know. I mean, you've got a sample, right?
It would not until you find the purebred Bigfoot. Not until you find one that has no human DNA.
Because you've got a being. I mean, whether you want to call it Bigfoot or you want to call it something else, you've got a being, an unknown being that hasn't been tracked in terms of their genome, but you've got some kind of being, and you've got a human female. So, put it together. That much is true, or in theory, assuming that these samples were not messed with and interfered with, and there's been some kind of, effort to disinfo the situation. But the sightings, of course, of Yeti around the world are plentiful, and I can say in the work of Ashiana Dean, she does talk about the Yeti as being a strain of extraterrestrial. They are known, as I say, to be able to go interdimensional. And actually, I have to say that George Lucas tapped into this, probably was given information about this, because when he made the what is that big
Star Wars.
Yeah, but what is that guy's name?
Chewbacca.
Yeah. So Chewbacca is a Yeti, and he's an extraterrestrial. So
See, that is, Kerry, that is an example of great minds think alike. Do you know how many times I've said, why is Bigfoot in Star Wars and why is Bigfoot on the $6 million man? You know? Because, and when I was talking to Ron, and if you watch that interview, I said, because I think it's psyops. I think they were trying to let people just kind of get this information, you know, kind of see what they would do with it.
yeah, they like to leak stuff. Yeah, of course, in movies, that's notorious. I mean, it's all towards the future of planet Earth, in essence, and humanity, and the fact that one day we're going to have, things are going to be known. It's going to be out there. So this is a way of preparing the public in a very sort of clandestine, subtle way. By seeding this information out there in movies, and so that, of course, is what they do.
Yeah. All right, Kerry, let's go. Let's leave Bigfoot alone for a minute. And I just want to make a comment, if I can, is you are just, you're looking great. I swear, you've been interviewing me for almost 3 years, and you look younger every time I see you. So I got to know what's going on. Are you exercising or?
Oh, I have what's called Kundalini activation, and I would credit that with keeping me young, in essence. But yes, I try to eat, right, and be healthy in every way. And yes, of course, I exercise, but I'm not like a fanatic. I'm not. In fact, I wish I was more disciplined in that sense. But I have a dog who keeps me so that I have to exercise for her sake. She's a Swiss Shepherd, and she's, active. And so, yeah, I mean, thank you. That's very kind of you.
Well, you bring beauty to the paranormal community. Kind of takes the edge off of guys like us. So, anyway, so tell me a little bit about Project Camelot. What's going on? The last time we talked, you were having issues with people, and has that been resolved? Have they gone away, or?
Well, I mean, I was being attacked, I guess, by a certain individual who, yes, seems to have disappeared from the scene, at least for the time being. I did have some notification that they were going to be
deported?
Well, no, they live in England, that person, but there was more than one person involved, and I believe that certain people were spoken to by certain other people. That's what I was told, but I have no real verification of that, other than the fact that has seemed to quiet down. And I'm about to go interview Captain Mark Richards again, actually September, I think it's 8th. And so I'm actually trying to raise some funding to do that. And so my interviews do continue, and he's a great disclosure witness, basically. So,
Kerry, that's a great point you bring up. Project Camelot is funded by viewers like you, like PBS. How can people support you and get money to your project?
Well, they can basically, send in money. We have a donate button on my website, so that's pretty obvious. And my website is projectcamelot.tv and projectcamelot.org or projectcamelotportal.com, and we have more than one URL, and they all go to the same place, simply because we found out as the years went on that we were being banned in various countries. So that has made it so that we have more than one URL to help people to reach us, regardless of what country they're in.
You are banned in some countries?
Yeah, and what that means is that they won't let their internet service provider will block our site.
You mean China?
Well, it's very likely in China, although I know we have had Chinese fans, if you want to call it that, and I have spoken in Hong Kong, so those people were able to see me, but
Not
I don't
China.
know about the interior of China. And I also can say that one of the reports, at least one, came from Germany. So I know that in certain parts of Germany we are banned.
Germany, really? Okay, I'm not even going to get into that. That is just weird. I thought someplace because you didn't have a scarf on your head or something. All right. So next question, Kerry. You are working on a book. What's the story? What a pun. What's the story with that?
Well, I am working on a book. I have a potential publisher, but the sort of jury is still out on that one. And if that doesn't fly, I may probably bite the bullet and self-publish. But at the moment, I am trying to go through some sort of more conventional channels to publish my book, simply because I'd like to try to cross over into other audiences than the one that I already have, which of course will be, I hope, interested in what I have to say. But so that's why I'm going the more conventional route. Whether it's going to work or not, I don't know. So that's sort of just up in the air. But I've written a book, and in fact, I recently I do want to compile I have 10 interviews with Captain Mark Richards. So one of my next projects is to compile those transcripts into a book, because that would be really great for people to have, I think.
Okay. Just to give you a little bit of hope, I interviewed a guy this was Books in Hindsight, and he was a author, and they told him when he went to publish, they said they want to know how many followers he had on Twitter. So you have so many followers, I don't think they're going to have a problem with it. So I don't think that's going to be an issue. And even if it were an issue, Kerry, you're better off self-publish this one, get the sales, and then go back, because then you can negotiate a much better deal, because on your first book, I guarantee you won't see a dime. Or maybe a dime, but probably not much more. So
I actually I've heard that, and I know all about that. So it is what it is. It's not a money-making operation.
Yeah.
Writing a book. Obviously, it's a labor of love, I would say, and it's also a desire to, I guess, chronicle the saga that I've gone through. Now having interviewed 1,000 or more people, some on and off, and some off the record. I have a body of knowledge that I want to impart to people, and because I think it's valuable for people to get someone who connects the dots, as opposed to has an individual story. So of course I have my own story, but what I have concentrated on in these 15 years is really putting, what they say, the big picture together. So that doesn't mean I'm right about everything, but it's certainly going to be a head start for a lot of people out there, and people that don't have the time to watch 1,000 interviews, especially since they're at least 2 hours long, most of them.
So I do what you do. I look for common themes, and then I pick things to support it. So what's one of the more important themes or ideas that you look at when you're compiling your evidence?
Well, I mean, the overriding theme is the secret space program. The idea that there is a group, a renegade group, that has separated from the rest of humanity, but is leading the way in terms of technology and making treaties and deals with various visiting ET races, and is living in what some I've even had witnesses say is as much as 10,000 years in advances of the way we're living here on planet Earth. And so, we are, in other words, there's a breakaway civilization And I think that it behooves us to, get up to speed on what they're about, what they're doing. I know they're using our DNA, they're using our children, they're using our tax money, they're, they finance this through what's called black projects, as well as human trafficking and organ trafficking and other nefarious means, high yield trading programs, what is called high yield trading programs, and so on. So, in other words, a good portion, like you could say it's maybe a 90-10, if that much, in other words, 90% of the world is living on sort of more or less the same way we've been living since, I think, the 1900s, to tell you the truth, with very little difference other than, a few bells and whistles like a computer. But other than that,
we're all just eating crap.
Well, we travel around in tin cans on highways using gasoline. That's the same as the original car, isn't it? And we still fly in tin cans from point X to point Y, and so on, when we should be, jumping from portal to portal, and we should be, have flying cars for that matter, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, in many ways, the so-called progress, in my view, of humanity has been at a standstill for many, many years, easily since the 1960s, and yet I know that the secret space program has made incredible advancements. Certainly they can reverse age you, you can live possibly unlimited number of years if they give you a pill, and so on. So, they have access to cure diseases of all kinds, you name it, to the best food and the best water possible through certain technologies that they've also gotten through ET races. And so this is being withheld from most of the world, which a lot of the world lives in a kind of a hand-to-mouth subsistence level existence. And many children and people still starve around the world. And people just work to pay their rent and stay alive. They, that whole paradigm is just so antiquated and old-fashioned. But this is how we live on planet Earth, and so I think it needs to change. So I try to make myself an agent for change, and so that's why I do what I do.
There was a quote from John Rockefeller, I think, John D., and they said, "Why don't you give your money back to the people you stole it from them?" And he said, "Because I'd have it back in a week." So what would be the point? And if you understand what he means, it's because he owns everything. So the next thing that I want to talk to you about or ask you, Kerry, is you keep saying they in the secret space program. I haven't figured out who they is or who they are. Who are they?
Well, they is really obvious, I think. First of all, the Illuminati is a certain group of dark magicians, and many individuals in the military, in the religious orders, in all walks of life are members of secret societies and have been coached along the way if they are part of a certain Illuminati bloodline or a group of bloodlines. There are the famous, bloodline families that are running the banking sector, etc. I mean, there have been people who have published, Manly P. Hall, Jordan Maxwell, David Icke, his name. All these people have named names and given you the sort of the pecking order, the structure of the individuals who are working on the dark side and have access to huge amounts of money. It is now, of course, it's not locked into countries. So we're talking about what is in essence a one world government that basically fights among themselves. But these are the Bilderberg group, the people that go to those meetings, etc. And then on top of it, it's their ET handlers, and those are reptilians and grays and a lot of different races of beings. The Anunnaki are involved, as well as members from different planets, Saturn, probably individuals from Saturn, as well as Aldebaran, who gave technology to the Nazis back in the days of Nazi Germany. And there are Pleiadians, so there are positive ET races here as well, trying to influence the situation and communicate with individuals. So it's a big playing field, but the ones at the top, it gets quite narrow at the higher you go. And they've been running the planet really since the days of Atlantis, at the very least, and certainly in the days of Egypt, which came after Atlantis, and so on. So they're not hard to identify. You know, you can pretty much see. I mean, the Rockefellers and the the Warburgs and Bechtel Corporation and Lockheed Martin and Skunk Works, and this is the military-industrial complex that Eisenhower talked about and warned people about. So the players are on the upper echelons of all these companies, the major aerospace companies, Boeing and Northrop and so on. So, I mean, it's not really rocket science to figure out who these people are. They're the ones that go to the meetings that you're not allowed in.
Yeah. Well, Kerry, I did and I'm still in the middle of this thing. I'm doing a investigation of the Maury Island incident. You know about that?
Yes.
Near Tacoma.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And the connections with JFK. And when you start to look at, JFK and the reasons, he was going to tell the Russians about the stuff that we had stored about the UFO stuff. He said he was going to tell the Russians about that. And, based upon what you're saying about the secret space program, that there is this group of people, and if you go back to like the Kellogg, back in Michigan, in the turn of the century, the elites of the U.S. did have this idea of society. Hitler got his ideas from those people about, genetic, keeping good genes, getting bad ones, and basically they had mapped out how to make the human race progress, right? And they were the rich people, they were the wealthy people of this country. And then there was World War II, and then the Nazis are here, and then Kennedy is going to tell them we have Roswell and all that, and then he says he's going to announce that to share this information with the Russians. So if what you say is true, that these people are just putting together or had been putting together this thing, and that oh yeah, we're just going to give all this to the Russians now. Well, of course they would have killed him. I mean, I'm surprised it took him so long, but it didn't take him that long. It took him about like 2 months. But he was going to share that all of our space information, all our technology with the Russians. And
I think that's not completely correct. What he was going to do, at least according to my witnesses, is he was going to release it to the United States. He wanted to dissolve the CIA, for example, which is part of the one world order, the government, the secret government running the planet right now.
Yeah.
And so it's what he wanted to do release the ET information to the public.
Yeah.
As far as the Russians already knew. They were involved. In fact, they're involved now. The Russians are our partners in the secret space program, and we're not really on two sides. That is a drama that is played out on planet Earth, surface Earth, to keep human beings distracted and also separate. There may be some competitiveness between the factions, and there may be some elements that are less than savory.
Yeah.
Individuals that are involved in the Russian government, but nonetheless, we work with them very closely in terms of the secret space program. So they were already clued in to our ET interaction and visitation on Earth back in the days of Kennedy. Kennedy he simply stumbled into this information. I've just written an article and done some investigation about how Nixon and the whole Watergate thing was, an individual has written a book called Watergate Hoax, and that is about the fact that Nixon was taken down by a mind control plot by the CIA, and he had to leave because I believe he tapped into the fact that the Bay of Pigs Cuban Missile Crisis was an ET battle, and they were afraid he was going to release that information to the public. So he became another president that was too in the know and had to be eliminated. And this is where we have the current administration. Trump is a president that is in the know, in part because of the Navy that has basically put him in office. And it's a certain portion of the Navy, it's not the whole Navy. And there may be some other services involved as well. But this is the kind of thing going on. But at any rate, I just want to say that it wasn't Kennedy, in my view, was not killed because he was going to release information to the Russians.
Well, okay, so I'm just going to say that I just saw somebody had done research and had said that on this show. But if he was going to come out and say it to the public, well, then obviously these countries that want to be our friends are going to say, well, you're going to share that with us, right? Because if you don't, then you're hiding something from us, and you're not really our friend. So I don't know, and it's going down the conspiracy thing, and well, I want to.
Public, it would have gone worldwide. I mean, there's no doubt about that.
Yeah. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit, Kerry, about you did an update on ET intervention, and I don't want to take too much more of your time, but I just had some questions about some of the things that you talked about, and you had talked about these mummies, with the big heads down in Peru. You said that those are the Anunnaki. You seem to think that those have something to do with the Anunnaki. No?
No, not at all.
So who are they?
There are, in South America, they have discovered what are called longheads that are evidence of Anunnaki. However, the Nazca aliens, I'm assuming you're referring to what's called the Nazca alien story, and that is a find in underground under the Nazca lines in that vicinity, in some caves in Peru, I believe it is. And that is, Gaiam TV sent a team down there. Jay Widener was among them, in case you know who Jay Widener is. And I spoke with him. I've known him for a number of years. And I can also tell you that I have a secret, a very high above top secret witness who has talked to me about this Nazca alien find. And it's not, there's only been, at least publicly, one large being who is not an Anunnaki, on the contrary, but is some race of being. And they called her Maria. They found her skeleton. And the remote viewers that viewed the situation and accurately did so before Gaiam TV arrived on the scene and then verified everything the remote viewers had said, so they proved correct. There were lots of these little bodies, much smaller than Maria, and they were basically biological robots, is what it appears. And there's some different information out there. I mentioned that Jaime Maussan has apparently been given some different information. I'm not sure why. But they did put pictures, this was a worldwide event. They put it out on like mainstream British press. I don't know how much it got into the American press, but I think it did. And they showed pictures of the little, robotic type aliens and they had an implant, this kind of plate or whatever that was, I'm not sure how you would term it, but it was implanted into all of the little robots. And then Maria, what's called Maria, also had an implant, although apparently she had it in a different area, implanted into a different part of her body, which I don't know, one seemed to be around the heart area and the others seemed to be around the throat area, if I understand it correctly. But that's that story, and I think it's very important because it indicates that not only they did date them or attempt to date them, and they dated them to a few thousand years ago, but not only that, but it proves that not only were ETs here, but they brought along with them biological robots and basically AI, artificial intelligence. And that is why it's such a hot topic and is staying secret. Basically, I've been told it will never see the light of day. Now, maybe that's a bit extreme. I hope that's not true. But at any rate, that's what I was told.
So is Maria, she has an elongated skull?
No, I think Maria, if you look at her, I don't consider her.
Can you describe her? I mean, I haven't seen her.
There's a photograph. There's lots of photographs of her. You can just go on the internet and see and put in Nazca Aliens.
You're going to make us guess?
Well, I mean, I don't have, if I show you a photograph, I mean, as far as she has sort of a large skull. It's large, but it's not elongated. What are called long heads. Yeah. There are a few different types of long heads, actually. And so you could maybe classify them differently. There's an archaeologist named Brian Forster who established a museum down in somewhere in, I think, South America, where he actually collects the long heads. Mm-hmm. And I know that Hugh Newman, another alternative, archaeologist, and Jim Vieira have written a book about the giants and also the long head skulls, and traced them to places around the world. So there's a long history of what are called long heads. But long heads are, in my view, different than Maria's skull. If you want to know what a real long head looks like, you could go to the Egyptian Museum and see, or just go on the internet and look for, you can put in long heads, obviously, but there are long heads in Malta, in the United States, all over the world, and they are literally elongated. Now, there was a custom to copy them. This is what people never get.
Right.
So humans realizing that these were supposedly a more intellectually developed people that were taller, that also had higher technology, tended to worship in the worst sense of the word, or want to be like. There's always a hierarchy in society. So if you wanted to be among the elite, if you try to make your child's skull more narrow, then you might make them more like tending towards being more elite. So there is evidence of actual compressing of skulls of children at certain areas, but that doesn't change the fact that there are actually authentic long head skulls that have been found that have never been misshapen, in essence, to get where they are, and they're part of a race of beings basically known as the Anunnaki, as far as I know.
Okay, yeah, I write about that civilization. A civilization developed out of Corral, Peru, just out of basically nowhere. About 3000 BC is the word, and it is about the time of the biblical Tower of Babel. And so I write about that in my book, and I just often wonder if those people are not the people that came out of the Tower of Babel. Excuse me. Have a cold. And then also, I can't remember what I was going to say, but they obviously, if you read some accounts, and I'm not going to go into it now, but some accounts describe that these people came to America and developed a huge civilization and flourished for a few thousand years and then wiped themselves out. And we're gonna be talking about the red-haired giants of Lubbock, whatever cave that is, in Utah next week. So, is there any relation do you think, between them and the red-haired giants?
Well, those would be Neanderthal, in my view. And no, I actually, although I can't say for certain, I mean, this is all, I get information. So obviously I've gotten information for many years, and I can compile it and tell you whether or not I've gotten certain information.
Yeah.
The strain of headedness, it comes through from the Neanderthal. This is my understanding. And that is a highly prized part of our genome, because the Neanderthals were known to be highly telepathic, for one thing. And so the Illuminati try to mate redheads with what are called blacks, which are sort of Anglo-Saxon blondes, in essence. They call them mating the red with the black, is what it is. And it's an occult sort of thing that they do.
So that's how we got Irish people.
Well, the Irish people would technically be blacks, except by this, coming from the Anglo-Saxon side. And then, of course, if they were mixed with a strain of the blue bloods that are also contain the Neanderthal gene, and then maybe you would get a kind of in other words, a lot of the genomes are very mixed bloodlines now, so it's not just one strain. But at any rate, so I mean, my understanding is that the redhead comes from the Neanderthal gene.
All right. So, Kerry, I'm gonna give you a reprieve. I'm gonna, if you'll give me about 10 more minutes, I'm gonna just ask you a few of the questions. I can't ask them all, but I want to ask you a few questions about your ET update, your ET intervention that you had out the other day. So this is going back to kind of the Bigfoot question, but who are the Nephilim?
Well, the Nephilim are, it's not completely clear. It's probably an Anunnaki human hybrid is probably what it is. So the Anunnaki came to Earth, and I don't even know the really accurate timeline, but from what I understand, it's around 50,000 years ago, maybe even more. And they tried to interfere with our genome and so on. But the human race and the humanoid races go back to the Pleiades, they go back to Lyra, and they have been, the Anunnaki are a branch of the humanoid races. Okay. So they did not create us any more than, they just interfered and tried to mix their DNA with ours. So my understanding is Nephilim is, as I say, an Anunnaki human hybrid.
Bigfoot?
What about Bigfoot?
Is Bigfoot a Nephilim?
Oh, no.
Okay.
And Bigfoot is, this sort of hairy type of individual.
Okay.
And you wouldn't really, I don't think you would call Bigfoot a humanoid. I think Bigfoot would be another genome altogether, probably more related to, I guess, ape-like creatures and or even, bears and so on. But a lot of these creatures are genetically engineered by various ET races and then planted on an Earth-like planet as part of the genome that's just indigenous to the planet. In other words, with certain kind of plants and animals, they basically populate a planet when they're deciding to seed it with a race of beings, whatever they happen to be.
Okay. All right. So the next question I have is on your ET intervention podcast. You talked about the Anunnaki, that they are controlling Israel. Now, what's the reason for that?
They're closely related by bloodline to that area, and that's one of the first areas that they sort of landed and took control over is Sumer, and Israel is part of that. So you've got that sort of strain there. And
Are the children of Israel, are they a strain of the Anunnaki?
yes,
Okay.
they're a bloodline related through bloodline. So they're not pure Anunnaki, if that's what you're asking.
Okay. And what about the Arabs?
Uh, Actually, the Arabs, I believe, are a split from the Israelis. So there is a sort of split in the genome again. There's lots of splits. I think the Jewish people are the Khazars, and they're also coming from the northern parts of the country.
Yeah, and also there's the story of Esau and Jacob, that were from two different mothers. So there's your split right there. All right. So, do you think that if these people are all Anunnaki, what's the point in blowing themselves up with a conflagration? Do you think the Anunnaki faction is going to step in and intervene, or they're going to say this is pointless to do this?
Well, I'm not sure what you mean by what's the point of blowing.
Well, I mean, we're kind of on the brink of war here, and if the Anunnaki are running the show, then are they going to put the brakes on, or are they going to push people into the conflict? Is this something they're waiting for?
Yeah, they're creating the conflict. They're very much involved. I mean, they're also involved in a war with what are called the reptoids, which are these human reptilian hybrids, specifically called reptoids. And they're a very negatively oriented race and are basically battling in the Middle East. And then, of course, we have, the United States, what's going on in the United States with the bloodlines here. And it's a huge mess, but there's a centralization point in Israel, in part because there's apparently that one of the most potent stargates on the planet is in Israel. And so there's a lot of the wars that go on in the Middle East are over the stargates. And this information comes from Mark Richards, but also other witnesses. And I can say that the location of the stargates are the Gulf of Aden, specifically in and around the area of what would be, maybe you might even say, the birthplace of Jesus, that area. Galilee, I guess, might be. And also Dimona is part of, there's a portal there. So there's a very substantial portal, all in, Israel's not very big.
Yeah.
And I've been there. And I haven't been to Dimona, but I've been around Israel. I've been to Galilee. I've been to the Dome of the Rock.
Have you been into the scene of the Church of the Nativity? Have you been in there?
Yeah, I guess so. Isn't that at Galilee?
No, it's in. It's right outside of Jerusalem. Actually, it's in. I can't think of it. It's in Bethlehem. What am I thinking? It's north of Jerusalem, and when I was in there, I mean, I'd been all over the Church of the Holy Sepulchre and this place where Jesus was supposedly entombed. But when I went into that place, the air was electric. I mean, I was going, what is this? There was like a hum, and it wasn't like you couldn't hear it, but it's one of the things where your hair stands up and you go, I just thought, boy, something happened here. I don't know what, but there's something happened here. So beyond that, I didn't know.
Right. Well,
I mean, besides Jesus being born,
there's a battle for control of planet Earth, for one. And apparently, from what I understand, the various factions that want to run the planet do keep the wars going in the Middle East for certain purposes. One of which is to hide this sort of battle for control over the stargates, and the other is the battle of the various races that are involved and have been going back for centuries.
Yeah.
So it is a bloodline war as well, and the bloodlines go to beings off planet as well as on. So it's quite complex story, but I do know that Mark Richards talks about the reptilians, especially the reptoids, coming from underground and attempting to bring equipment in through those gates and so on.
Okay. So who are our friends are not the reptoids, not the reptilians?
No, 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 they're enemies of humanity, basically.
Okay.
Now, there are some reptoid and human reptilian hybrid races that may be more positively oriented or trying to turn towards a more positive sort of trajectory.
Yeah. But just, and this is my kind of my last question, but the we're connected to the Anunnaki because the Anunnaki created us, correct?
No, they didn't create us. Absolutely not.
Okay.
I think I said that in the beginning, but anyway, no, they didn't create us. They have interfered with our genome.
Okay.
And they tried to, basically, they did successfully, to some degree, from what I understand, everyone on planet Earth, if I understand what Annunaki is claiming, which is through what's called the Guardian races, which is a group of at least 12 races that contributed to the creating of this vessel we call a human being, which is a man of many colors, hue, man, so many bloodlines, sort of a mixture, a hybrid being. So what we're talking about is the Anunnaki gene, there to some degree is part of the genome now, the human genome, but it's in small degrees. It is much more pronounced in the Jewish race.
Okay, but our connection to the Anunnaki then is a genetic one, whereas, because I'm just trying to say, well, why don't we? What's the problem with the reptilians? Why don't we side with them? Why are we tied to the Anunnaki? And I guess it's a family kind of thing.
We're not actually. I mean, we're, in other words, I'm not sure where you're getting your information, but to my knowledge, the Anunnaki, yes, are working with our government and have also tried to continue to run the planet as they did eons ago. And as Bob Dean says, they're walking the halls of the Pentagon. So there are definitely ruling elements within the Anunnaki that still would like to run Earth, but they don't have complete control. And there may be elements of the secret space program that are basically taking orders from some of them. Clark McClelland, for example, is notable because he was working for NASA when he actually saw very tall beings, which in essence were humanoid. I think they were around 9 or 12 feet tall, on a closed circuit television on the space station, working with humans, which were quite a bit shorter than them, astronauts. So we do know that they're involved with orchestrating some things and perhaps, again, trying to rule. But there are other strains of ETs that are also have gotten into the game, so to speak. And, I can't tell you everything about everything. All I can tell you is the elements that I've been told about. Now, the reptoids and the reptilians are age-old enemies of humanoid races. In other words, they've been going around galaxies for eons, interfering with, taking over, and in fact, they invaded the Anunnaki, and there is an Anunnaki reptilian hybrid race called the Syrian Anunnaki, from what I understand. So that's where you get some people being confused, thinking Anunnaki are reptilians, but they're not. There's just a certain branch of them that was invaded and taken over.
Okay.
They started out as Pleiadians. So the humanoid races, you could see them on one side. The reptilian and reptoids are descended from the Draco, and the Greys are descended from the reptoids on the other. And the Anunnaki, in essence, ended up being a hybrid of both. And humans, by the way, because we have the reptilian brain, have some reptilian DNA. And this is where we get the Bushes and some of the Blue Bloods being descended from having more reptilian DNA than us, say some of the other humans.
Okay. Boy, Kerry, I do not know how you keep track of all that. That's a lot of stuff. But, going back to your thing about humans, well, yeah, we have what's called the reptilian brain, and that controls our basic motor functions. So that must have come from somewhere. So, you may have a very valid point. All right. So the last thing that I would like to ask you, Kerry, is actually, I want to ask you two questions. You said in Israel, these Anunnaki. Oh, I wanted to tell you this. I interviewed James Gilliland from ECETI Ranch. You know him?
Yes, I interviewed him once, I think.
Great. And he said that he was in his hotel room and an 8-foot Anunnaki showed up. It was a beautiful woman. And I said, were you in a hotel or were you in Vegas? And I didn't even think about it, but it was both. He was there for the convention. But anyway, James said that he had an 8-foot tall Anunnaki woman show up. So they're really very tall beings, but they look like humans.
Well, right. Although, what people don't realize is there are also very short, from what I understand, bald men that are Anunnaki. So they have their genome has changed to some degree, and it also may be a trick of how they can manifest.
Okay.
But generally speaking, they're at least 9 feet, is my understanding, and 12 is also fairly common.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know what you do with an 8-foot woman in your room. So the next thing I wanted to ask you is, you said that those Anunnaki are just showing up in houses in Israel. Yes?
Well, there was a period of time when they were doing that, and this is where I talk about Bray, who is a Israeli journalist who actually has died now, but several years ago they began getting reports at the newspaper he was working at that women were reporting these very tall male individuals coming into their houses in the middle of the day and just walking around like they owned the place. And I don't know why this was even going on, and I don't think he knows why either, but it was quite a substantiation of the idea that there are quite a few Anunnaki involved with Israel, and there have been photographs taken. I actually have one on my website where you can see these very tall Anunnaki soldiers, with a bunch of human prisoners. So, but Barry Shamish was reporting on a phenomena, and he went out and investigated it and found it to be true, that this was going on, that apparently it went on for a short period of time. It's just, I happened to tap into it and I interviewed him about it, so I know that it's real.
Okay. Yeah, I was just going to say, maybe they should change your name from the Anunnaki to the Anu-Not-Naki, because it doesn't seem like they knock on these people's doors before they come in. And then the last one, you said that you have the reptilians. Somebody is infiltrating across the border in the Mexican border. So
I don't think I said that. I'm not sure what you're saying.
Okay, because there's something about that there was these people or not people, but these like hybrids or something were infiltrating across, and they were characterized as being unfeeling, antisocial, and kind of being of.
That's the Gray human hybrid program. It's to do with abductions. The Greys there's various races of Greys, but there are very specific races of Greys that abduct humans and use them for food, and have been creating basically they want to infiltrate Earth and take over Earth, and they are reptilian, and they have got this Gray human hybrid program. It's been highly documented really across the board, but they used to abduct humans in the United States a great deal, and then early on, our secret space program negotiated, basically through MJ-12, a treaty with them and gave them free reign in South America, Mexico, and Latin America. And so they concentrated down there also because those indigenous people that are related most closely to the root races are better breeding stock, if you will, for bringing in the gray genetics. So they really went crazy down there, abducting and creating gray human hybrid children.
Yeah.
So those gray human hybrid children are now coming of age. They will be, because a lot of this went on from the 50s, 1950s, in mass, up through really now. And so you could take anybody that was born, from then on, I guess you might say, but specifically the concentration on maybe younger people coming in through the border. So the border, what I'm saying is that I believe the Trump administration is very well aware that the gray human hybrid children that are coming across the border will have basically some what we'll think of as special powers. They will be able to teleport things, do various things. So coming through the gray DNA, and at the same time they will have a lack of emotionality because the grays are basically got rid of their emotional nature as much as possible and became highly intellectual as a society. So this is the kind of thing that is basically setting the scene for future issues with these races. Now, all of humans are hybrids, and the difference is only that the gray human hybrids have, you might say they're half gray and half human, and the human half is a mixture, obviously a genome of many bloodlines. So the gray side, if it predominates, could become a problem, is all I'm saying. And I think that it's very possible that this is part of the issue to control the border that they're really working on. And I think that there's no telling what way that'll all go. I also know that China plans to invade through the Mexican border and underground, and has been amassing troops and various things under Mexico for quite a long time. So that's another reason why that border is highly
contested
area. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, except for that, because you said that these hybrids are unfeeling and antisocial, and so my first reaction was, well, aren't those?
I'm not saying they are unfeeling. I'm saying there's going to be a tendency there.
Okay.
So that doesn't mean that every single one of them will be like that.
Right.
And one has to keep the open option that in other words, you've got a hybrid, so you cannot predict which part of the DNA is going to activate and connect with what part of the human DNA and genes, and what's going to be predominant in every single one of them. But by and large, you could say that as a race of beings, the gray human hybrids, and you can listen to David Jacobs, who's done a tremendous amount of investigation on this, is really something of an expert on this based on all the people he's interviewed about this, that what does tend to crop up is this nature, which tends to be intellectual and not emotional.
Well, if you wouldn't have thrown in that intellectual part, I would have said, well, aren't those just Democrats? But I guess I won't say that. Well, Kerry, do you want to, I won't give you the option to go. Can you tell me very quickly, what is a super soldier? And
it's an augmented human. It's augmented with special abilities and most likely, biological implants, as well as android type, technological implants to enhance their abilities as a soldier in every way. Also to enhance their psychic ability, telepathic ability to move things with their minds, etc. So it's an enhanced soldier.
Okay. And yeah, I was just going to ask you about the psychic abilities. All right, Kerry, I've had you for probably half an hour longer than we had agreed on, and I want to let you go. I just want to remind people, Kerry is at, if you don't know, Kerry is at Project Camelot, and it's projectcamelot.org, right?
Well, it's projectcamelot.org, projectcamelot.tv, and projectcamelotportal.com. There are 3 URLs. They all go to the same place.
Okay. All right. Well, Kerry, I really, I'm so honored again to have you on my podcast, and I really hope that the people who are watching, if they don't know who you are, I hope you'll subscribe to Kerry's channel, and if you like what you see on my channel, go ahead and subscribe to Encounters USA. So, for Kerry Cassidy of Project Camelot and me, author Matthew Hines, I just want to say that if you're out in the woods by yourself or with other people, don't be the last one in line, and always watch your back. Thanks for listening to tonight's show. Please remember, if you've had an encounter, we want to hear about it. Go ahead and email us at encountersusa1@gmail.com or contact us at encountersusa.com, our website, and go to the contact form. All right, everybody. Until next time, be careful out there. And if you're out in the woods, watch your back.